The horse kicked the stall door hard enough to splinter wood. Claire Hayes stumbled backward, her breath coming fast, and pressed herself against the barn wall. Outside, the blizzard screamed like something alive. Inside, 8 horses stamped and snorted in the darkness, terrified by thunder that had no business arriving with snow. She had been trapped here for 2 nights. 2 nights in a stranger's barn while he lay unconscious in the house 50 yards away. 2 nights wondering if he would wake up, wondering if anyone would come, wondering if she would freeze before spring arrived. But that was not how it started. 3 days earlier, Claire had been driving her wagon toward Leadville, Colorado, carrying the last of her belongings and what remained of her hope. She was 34 years old, widowed for 6 months, and pointed toward a cousin's house because her own had been sold to pay debts her late husband had hidden from her. The road climbed through pine forests and open meadows dusted with early March snow. The sky had been blue that morning. By afternoon, it had turned the color of iron. She should have turned back. Instead, she pushed forward, and the storm caught her on a high ridge where the wind had nothing to slow it down. Snow came sideways, blinding and cold. Her mare panicked. The wagon slid. Claire fought the reins, but the wheel struck a hidden stone, and the axle cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The wagon lurched. Supplies spilled into the snow. Her mare broke free and bolted into the white chaos. Claire stood alone on a mountain road in a blizzard with no horse, no shelter, and no idea how far she was from anything. She walked. The wind shoved her. Snow filled her boots. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves. She kept moving because stopping meant dying. Then, through the swirling white, she saw it. A barn, dark and solid, standing beside a small log house. Smoke rose from the chimney before the wind tore it apart. She stumbled toward the barn and shoved the door open. Warmth hit her face, not fire warmth, but animal warmth. Horses filled the stalls, their breath steaming in the cold air. Chickens huddled on roosts in the corner. A cow lowed softly from a pen near the back. Claire collapsed just inside the door. When she woke, it was dark. Her body ached. Her dress was still damp. She sat up slowly, shivering, and heard the storm still raging outside. A lantern hung near the door. She lit it with shaking hands. The barn was well kept. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Hay was stacked high and dry. Feed bins were full. Someone cared for this place. She fed the horses because they were stopping anxiously. She scattered grain for the chickens. She milked the cow because her udder was swollen and tight. Then she heard it, a sound from the house. A crash, like something heavy falling. Claire stood at the barn door, staring through the snow toward the dim glow of the house. Every instinct told her to stay put. She did not know who lived here. This was not her home, but someone might need help. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and ran. The house door was unlocked. Inside, a fire burned low in the stone hearth. A table was set with an uneaten meal, and on the floor near the stairs lay a man, face down, one arm twisted beneath him. Claire dropped to her knees beside him. He was breathing, short, shallow breaths. She rolled him carefully onto his back. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair silvering at the temples and a face carved by wind and work. Blood seeped from a gash on his forehead. His skin was hot to the touch. Fever. She dragged him, barely, closer to the fire. She cleaned the wound with water from the kettle. She covered him with every blanket she could find. Then she sat back, heart pounding, and realized what she had done. She had entered a stranger's home. She was alone with an unconscious man in the middle of a blizzard with no way to leave and no one to help. If he died, she would be found here. People would ask questions she could not answer. If he woke, he might not believe her story, might think she had come to steal, might think worse. But she could not leave him to die. So Claire Hayes made a choice. She would keep him alive. She would keep his animals alive. And when the storm ended, she would explain everything and pray he was the kind of man who believed the truth. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the man's breathing rattled in his chest. And Claire fed the fire, her hands steady now, because there was no other choice but to see this through. The first full day passed in a rhythm of survival. Claire moved between the house and the barn, fighting the wind each time. She fed the animals, mucked stalls, collected eggs, and milked the cow. She had grown up on a farm, and her hands remembered the work even when her mind felt numb with cold and fear. In the house, the man's fever burned. She forced water between his lips. She changed the bandage on his head. She whispered to him, not prayers exactly, but steady words meant to anchor him to life. You have 8 horses depending on you. A cow. 2 dozen chickens. You cannot leave them. He did not wake. By the second day, the storm had not weakened. Snow piled high against the barn door. Claire had to shove it open with her shoulder, and each time she feared it would not open at all. She found a broken section of fence near the barn, posts leaning, wire sagging. The horses could not go out yet, but when they did, this fence would not hold. She pulled on work gloves she found hanging by the door and hammered the post straight with tools from the barn. Her shoulders ached. Splinters bit through the gloves. But she finished it, because if she stopped working, she would think too much. About her dead husband. About the debts. About the fact that she was trapped on a mountain with a dying stranger. That evening, she returned to the house and found him awake. His eyes were open, gray, sharp despite the fever, and fixed on her. Claire froze in the doorway, snow still clinging to her skirt. Who are you? His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. She set down the bucket of milk carefully. My name is Claire Hayes. My wagon broke on the ridge. I came here for shelter. You were on the floor when I found you. You have been fevered for 2 days. He tried to sit up. Pain crossed his face, and he sank back down. Your animals are fed, she added quickly. The cow is milked. I mended the fence by the north pasture. He stared at her. You mended my fence. It was broken. In a blizzard. Better than sitting idle. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind hammered the walls. My name is Thomas Garret, he said finally. This is my ranch. I know I am trespassing. When the storm clears, I will leave. You have been keeping me alive. I could not let you die. His gaze held hers. Most people would have taken what they needed and gone. I am not most people. Something shifted in his expression, not quite trust, but the beginning of it. Over the next hours, his fever broke. He was weak, but he could sit up. Claire made broth from dried beef and vegetables she found in his stores. He ate slowly, watching her move around his kitchen like she belonged there. You are alone out here? She asked. 3 years now. My wife died in childbirth. The baby, too. The words were plain, but the grief beneath them was not. I am sorry, Claire said quietly. He nodded once. Your husband? Pneumonia. 6 months ago. She paused. He left debts I did not know about. I lost everything. Where were you headed? Leadville. My cousin offered me a place. Thomas looked toward the window, where snow still fell thick and relentless. You will not make it before spring. Roads will not clear for weeks. Claire's heart sank. She had nowhere else to go. No money. No horse. I can work, she said. 4 room and board. Until the pass opens. Thomas studied her. You have already been working. Then it is settled. He almost smiled. You are a stubborn woman, Mrs. Hayes. Stubbornness kept me breathing. The storm finally broke on the 3rd morning. Sunlight poured through the windows, blinding and bright. The world outside was buried in white. Thomas stood on shaking legs and walked to the barn with Claire beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. Inside, the horses were calm. The stalls were clean. Feed and water were full. He ran his hand along the mended fence. You did this. I told you I would work. He turned to face her. Why? Why what? Why not just take shelter and wait it out? Why care for animals that are not yours? Why fix a fence you will never see again? Claire met his eyes. Because it needed doing. Because they depended on someone. Because I know what it feels like when no one comes. Thomas's expression softened. You are welcome to stay as long as you need. I will earn my keep. You already have. Spring was still weeks away. The mountains would hold them here together. 2 people who had lost everything, learning to survive in the spaces grief had carved out. And something neither of them expected had begun to grow in the silence between them. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt like partnership. Thomas regained his strength slowly, and Claire worked beside him without hesitation. She cupped, mended clothes, cared for the animals, and helped him reinforce the barn roof before the next storm arrived. They spoke more as the days passed. Thomas told her about building the ranch, about his wife Mary, about the stillness that had filled the house after he buried them both. Claire told him about her marriage, about the man she had loved who had smiled while hiding ruin, about the shame of learning the truth only after the creditors came. I thought I knew him, she said one evening as they sat by the fire. I thought we shared everything. Maybe he was protecting you, Thomas offered. Protection built on lies is just another cage. He nodded slowly. Mary used to say I worked too much. I thought I was building something for her. Turns out I was just avoiding sitting still. They both stared into the flames. We cannot go back, Claire said quietly. Only forward. Then we go forward. One morning in early April, the snow finally began to melt. Water ran in streams down the hillsides. Green pushed through the white. The pass to Leadville would open soon. Thomas found Claire in the barn, brushing down one of the horses. Roads will be clear in a week, he said. She kept brushing, her hands steady. I know. Your cousin will be waiting. Yes. He hesitated. Where you could stay. Claire's hands stilled. She turned to face him. Not as hired help, he continued. As my wife. Her breath caught. Thomas, I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I have watched you these weeks. You are strong. You are kind. You do not quit. He stepped closer. I was alone here. I thought I would stay alone. Then a storm brought you. And now I cannot imagine this place without you in it. Tears rose in Claire's eyes. I was running away. I thought my life was over. Maybe it was. Maybe this is a new one. She searched his face. What if I disappoint you? What if I am not what you need? You have already proven what you are. You stayed when you could have run. You worked when you could have rested. You saved my life, Claire. I am not asking for perfection. I am asking for partnership. The words broke something open inside her. I do not have anything to bring. No dowry. No family name. Just myself. That is all I want. She thought of the woman she had been before. The one who had smiled through loneliness. Who had believed love meant silence and duty. That woman was gone, buried under snow and loss. This woman standing in a barn on a Colorado mountain was someone new. Someone who had survived. Someone who had chosen to stay and fight instead of surrender. Yes, she whispered. I will marry you. Thomas pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future felt possible. They married in the small church in Leadville 2 weeks later. Claire wore a simple dress she sewed herself. Thomas stood beside her in his best coat, his hands steady in hers. Her cousin attended, bewildered but happy. A handful of ranchers Thomas knew came as well, men who had seen him disappear into grief and were glad to see him step back into life. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her gently, and the congregation applauded. That summer, Claire planted a garden that stretched wide behind the house. Carrots, beans, squash, flowers. Thomas built her a fence to keep the deer out, and they worked side by side in the evenings, dirt under their nails, sun on their faces. One afternoon, as they stood together looking over the land, Thomas said, I never thought I would feel this again. Feel what? Hope. Claire leaned into him. Neither did I. The ranch grew. They bought more cattle. Claire began teaching children from nearby homesteads in the front room twice a week. Thomas laughed more. The house filled with sound again. Years later, when people asked how they met, Claire would smile and say, Storm trapped me in his barn. And Thomas would add, she fixed my fence, fed my animals, and saved my life. But what they did not say, what they carried quietly between them, was this. They had both been broken when they met. They had both been running from grief. And in a barn on a mountain during a blizzard, they had found something neither expected. Not rescue, not salvation, partnership. The kind built on truth, work, and the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. The storm had brought Claire to Thomas Garret's door. But it was everything that came after. The mended fence, the steady hands, the quiet decision to build something new that made them whole.